Copyright, an issue in EdTech. In this video, we'll be discussing the following considerations when it comes to copyright: the Teach Act, fair use, and Creative Commons licensing. This is an excerpt from Open Access is Almost Here, Navigating Through Copyright, Fair Use, and the Teach Act by Margaret G. Lyons. I wanted to pull out the two sidebars that she created about the Teach Act that really encapsulate the highlights of this legislation. In the first sidebar, she lists the Teach Act's criteria. We'll skip the institutional criteria and move on to where we come in, the faculty and student criteria. In order for your use of copyrighted material to be permitted under the Teach Act, it must meet the following criteria. Amount used is comparable to a usual live session. Content is delivered under the direction of an instructor. Works used are directly related to the course topic. Works are made available only to students enrolled in the course for a limited time. And faculty and students must demonstrate compliance with institutional copyright policies. All of that basically describes the general use of material within a live classroom. When this is shifted to digital content, particularly online, it's a little trickier, but the rules still apply. It means you need to be very aware of amount of and access to that content, such as through a learning management system. And it also means you need to preserve the teacher-directed delivery, perhaps by including more context, assignments, etc. I also want to take note of this other sidebar, which shows what works are permitted and not permitted under the Teach Act. Works permitted under the Teach Act include non-dramatic literary or musical works, including poetry, short story readings, and all other music except opera, still images, and reasonable portions of other works. Works not permitted under the Teach Act include digital media designed to be sold for use in a classroom setting through mediated instruction, textbooks, and course packs, electronic reserve supplemental reading, and unlawfully acquired copies. So with all that information, let's see how we would decide whether or not our use is protected under the Teach Act. Let's say I want to show a few clips from Ken Burns' The Vietnam War from my Netflix account during my face-to-face U.S. history course. It will end up being about 30 minutes of content. The full documentary, by the way, is about 18 hours. So let's go through our Teach Act criteria. Is the amount roughly equal to a live session? Yes, 30 minutes is a reasonable length for a class session. Thumbs up. Is it delivered under the direction of the instructor? Yes, in my face-to-face class, I'll be introducing it, navigating to the correct clips, and discussing it with students. Is the work directly relevant to my course content? Yes, the Vietnam War documentary is very relevant to our U.S. history course. Is it only available to students in this course for a limited time? Yes, because this is happening during class time, so just the students who are in there at that time would have access. I want to note that if you were to post this, for example, on Canvas, that doesn't set a very limited time. And if you were to share it on a more public platform like YouTube or a personal blog, you're also not limiting it to your students. Those kind of uses would not be protected by the Teach Act. Our final question, does your use comply with institutional copyright policies? Let's say yes, it does. We didn't look at that in detail right now, but we'll be looking at where to find Messiah's perspective and policies later. So I've got all thumbs up. This use is protected by the Teach Act. Now let's discuss fair use. We don't have as clear-cut of criteria as we had back in the Teach Act. It is more about considering these 4 to 5 factors, which include purpose, nature, amount, impact on market, and according to some, good faith. We're going to go into each one of these individually. We'll start with purpose, and this refers to why you are using this copyrighted material. If your purpose is to gain profit in any kind of way, for example, that does not align with fair use, so thumbs down. Another consideration for purpose is whether or not your use is transformational, which would be in favor of fair use. For example, if you are assembling video clips for an analysis or even for satire, you are transforming it. Watching your analysis or satire is not an equivalent experience to watching the full film or films involved. Our next factor is nature, and this is not the nature of your use, but the nature of the work itself. If the work is educational, for example, that would favor fair use, whereas more artistic and creative works like drama, poetry, and fiction oppose fair use. Also, if the work is unpublished, that would oppose fair use too. The amount factor is pretty straightforward. How much of the original work are you using? If it is a proportionally small amount, that would favor fair use. If you're using most or all of the work, that would oppose fair use. The impact on market factor is also pretty clear. Could your use of their work have a negative impact on their ability to make a profit? If people could potentially not purchase the original because your use is available, that would oppose fair use. Also, if you are creating mass copies or virtually making copies by putting it in a more public online location, that would also be opposing fair use. To align with fair use, you shouldn't have any impact on the author's potential for profit. Lastly, the good faith factor is not necessarily on everyone's list, but Margaret Lyons includes it in her piece, and I think it's a good point. If you can show that you've made good faith efforts to get permission to use someone's work, that will work in your favor for fair use, even if you didn't get a response. So you might have picked up on the fact that fair use has a lot more gray area than the Teach Act did. To be protected by fair use, you need to consider all of these factors and then judge whether the favoring or opposing answers outweigh the others. Let's try this with an example. I want to share a great article that was printed in the Journal of Consumer Psychology this month. I've scanned it into a PDF file to post in Canvas, and I've listed the author and journal in Canvas too to give it a citation. Is this protected by fair use? Well, let's go through each factor. Purpose. My purpose is not to make money since this is supplementing my instruction. That favors fair use. However, I'm not transforming the work at all. Just changing it from a print to a PDF file is not a significant transformation, so that opposes fair use. Mixed bag here. Next, nature. The work is definitely more educational than artistic or creative, so that favors fair use. It is also a published work rather than an unpublished one, which favors fair use too. 2 thumbs up for this factor. Now the amount. I'm using the whole article rather than an excerpt, so this does not favor fair use. Thumbs down. Impact on market. This one isn't looking great either. If students are accessing the article in Canvas, they're not paying for it like you would if you subscribe to the journal or if the library pays for access through subscription databases. Also, by putting it online, you're essentially creating mass copies because anyone can download or print this article now, whereas the original publication was more limited due to its print nature. Let's pause here for a moment. If you use a permalink to the article's location in one of our library databases, this resolves our impact on market issues. The college already pays for that type of access, so linking to the article in that database doesn't impact the market at all. However, with our scan and upload to Canvas method, or even if I were to download it from a website and upload it to Canvas, we'd have 2 thumbs down for this fair use factor. Lastly, good faith. I didn't reach out to the author or publisher of this work to get permission to scan, upload, and share this work with others. You can do this, and Messiah staff will even serve as intermediary if you wish. Talk to the librarians or Learning Technology Services for more information on that. But thumbs down for good faith with this particular use. Well, looks like I did not do well on these factors. I think it's safe to say that this example would not be protected by fair use. Our last topic is Creative Commons licensing. You've likely seen these symbols or heard about Creative Commons on the internet. It's a way for individuals to identify when and how others can use their work. This is particularly relevant when it comes to images. The key symbols to consider are shown here. 2 C's in a circle means that this work does have a Creative Commons license. That's usually followed by some more specifications. For example, the image of a person in a circle represents attribution, meaning that if you use the work, you must credit the author or artist. The circle that contains a $ crossed out refers to non-commercial use. The curved arrow that looks a bit like a refresh button from a web browser represents share alike, which means that any use of this work must also be shared with the same Creative Commons licensing as the original work. The equal sign refers to non-derivatives, specifying that your use of the original work cannot alter that work. For example, you can't Photoshop the image. Lastly, if you see a circle that contains the letter C crossed out, that means the work is public domain, so you can use it in any way that you wish without even having to credit the author or artist. Now, this all means that you can't just Google images and expect to be able to use them any way you want. Google is a search engine, not an author. They don't create or own any of the content, they just show it to you. 2 great resources for finding images that you can use are pixabay.com, which has a lot of photographs that are totally free to use, and flaticon.com, which has simple graphics that you can use as long as you credit the artist. For more resources to find copyright-free material, check out Messiah's copyright website. This website has a ton of useful information and resources for faculty, students, and staff to learn about copyright. Here are some references and sources for this video. There's the Margaret Lyons article I mentioned earlier, which I highly recommend. We also have the Messiah College copyright site, as I said on the last slide. You can find more detail on Creative Commons from their websites listed here. And all the icons in this presentation were created by Freepik and are on flaticon.com. They're licensed under Creative Commons 3.0 as BY, which we've now learned means Creative Commons with attribution. If you have further questions about copyright, pop by the library or reach out to a librarian by phone or email.